Yate Shedane Kia Ani Nishle do Belagana Bashes Chin, Deschini de Che do Belagana de Chanale, Shay Amber, Kenneth Bakradi Initiate. So at IndigiFest, I was given some guidance on how to make a TikTok, and I let the influencer know maybe I should just start doing reactions because I'm not exactly sure what type of conversations our relatives are looking for. By trade, I'm a policy analyst, and I want to do more informational videos about, the budget process, a lot of questions and assumptions of how our Navajo Nation funding is allocated. So I think we could dive into that. So this is going to be my first somewhat of a reaction. I just got home from the presidential forum at the Phil Thomas Center. It was an interesting experience in seeing the candidates and how they are answering questions from the first forum that Northern Agency veterans hosted back in Farmington, I don't know, about 6-7 weeks ago. It was great to see some of the community members who came out to watch in person and hear from the candidates. And the facility was very nice. So thank you, CCSD, for having a community space. And it's still extremely warm. And that's why I chose to be outside, just to provide some of these reflections. And then I realized we have an active dog population, and they just love barking and visiting one another. So you might hear some background, but that's just how it goes. I just wanted to kind of get into some of my thoughts about the presidential forum. First started listening online while we were driving in, so that's great. I really appreciate that a majority, if not all, of the presidential forums have been streamed live. I like going back and hearing certain questions or getting clarifications on some of the positions of the candidates, trying to understand where they get their information from. And it also, there's a lot of great regional questions. So it's really important as our next president really understands the different regional challenges. This forum was great because it centered around natural resources, and as we all know, a majority of our budget comes from natural resource extraction. And we could go into a little bit of history, and that's why the Permanent Trust Fund was established with some settlement funding, and there was always a plan or a point in time where we knew some of our finite resources would not be able to sustain the government. So sitting on Budget and Finance Committee, we do have these conversations and get reports, but we're also looking at not only what type of government our people want and a government that will work for us, but also the size of the government. Is it efficient? Is it effective? And how much resources are we putting into the government? And are we getting the type of services we desire and that we prioritize? And that's where we have conversations about veterans, how they're being treated, what type of resources are available. That's why we really are looking at our senior centers, because they get some of their money from the general funds, Navajo Nation funds. And I think for our budget, we also everyone should understand where the revenue comes from. And why do I think that's important? Because, and I love this saying, we can agree and disagree. Our opinions, we don't need to agree on the interpretation. but the facts are facts. And what I think and what I know now is these presidential forums, there needs to be an independent fact checker, because sometimes, and I understand it's very hard to get information about Navajo, especially on some of the programs, but some of the comments and some of the assertions they're false. And I would challenge the presidential candidates who are providing false information on where they're collecting that information and how they're using it as candidates for their positions. Because one thing, again, we may not all agree, but the facts are facts. And so we need to start seeing facts. We need to start seeing when these positions are being developed, what are they using to inform? Because during this time of COVID, some feel that we're in a recovery stage. Our numbers are slowly climbing up, but luckily we're not seeing the same rate of individuals being in the hospital or being in critical positions, but it's still happening. There's still critical, individuals getting their needs. We need leadership to provide factual information, and if they provide their opinion, that's fine, even if we disagree. But you need to provide the facts. You need to bring out the data, the paperwork, and say, where are you getting this information from? And why is that so important? Because during times of a public health emergency, a weather emergency, a winter that's monsoon, we need to have trust in your leadership that you're making the best decisions. Again, we can disagree on that process, but we need to know the facts so we could hold you accountable for your position and how you're reading and interpreting the data. And most importantly, at this point, if you could really synthesize the information you're reading, or are you just regurgitating false information? And that's hurtful, that's demeaning, and the way we speak and talk about our people. There should be a level of respect that everyone is doing the best they can, and maybe it's not up to your standard, maybe it's not up to your opinion, but we deserve that respect, because we've gone through so much, not only during COVID, but some of the systemic failures when it comes to access to resources and being underserved and under-resourced. I just don't think it's an appropriate time for some of the rhetoric I'm hearing. And it's my opinion. But the fact remains that the information that's being shared is false. And so the challenge now is, as we move forward and make a critical decision, what documents need to come to the surface. Documents and data and fact checking. And I know there's a lot of brilliant folks out there, and you follow the discussion of council, you follow the discussion of the executive side, maybe their town halls. What would that look like for us to start fact checking on a regular basis for accountability's sake? There should be I'm almost to the point. I'm almost to the point where I wanted, and I did. I started sending out documents to people because it was so frustrating. Like, we have a Navajo Nation energy policy. It's not a good policy. It's not the greatest policy, but it's there. And so when the question came up around, the energy plan, there was no reference made to this policy that exists on Navajo. So those are just some of the bare minimums I think that we should be expecting at this point and getting ready for a forum that's specifically surrounded around natural resources. And what does that look like? Maybe I'm asking for too much, but I think that could be the bare minimum at this stage and age of time where we have the information that we need, and seeing how our leaders will use that and how they will pull it up and say, here is the document, and definitely share their interpretation, but also have that document for others to see so they can make their own decision and their own opinions on what's being told. So let's dig into that. I think I'm gonna push myself to provide additional information. All of my documents are pretty much on a Dropbox, so we'll work with some Navajo IT folks to make that public and just kind of secure, so there's no, nobody tries to take it or erase it. And kind of breaking down this budget process. The budgets are out there. I just signed a budget 2 days ago for the Office of Management and Budget for Navajo Nation. So I think we'll take it baby steps, and so we'll start this series. Ask Amber. Ask me the questions you need to know about your government and where you could find that information. And I think collectively, like as a crowdsource, we can start piecing together some of the fractured history of Navajo Nation, but also creating what's our new reality in the digital world and what resources are available to us and how can we provide that information. And so I just wanted to give you my reflection. I know this is a bit longer than I thought, and but I'm really glad I did not do any TikTok reactions to this forum, because I also understand, where some of the candidates, these are their final days to try to gather support or create some kind of buzz. And so I think the next forum, or we'll figure out like what is the best way for reactions. And maybe that's not the forte that we move forward with, but at least I could provide additional information and be like, okay, here's the source of that, and you decide for yourself. But I hope you're doing well. You all got home safely. It's a beautiful evening, but it is way past my bedtime. And I think in terms of how we move forward is just to re-examine, like, what is the lesson learned from today? What did we learn, and how can we move forward? And are we showing up in a way that our people need now? And are we showing up in a way where we're creating a viable future for our families? And so we'll just continue with the good fight. We'll continue to be open to disagreements, but we will not, and I will not allow false information. If there's factual documents, again, different interpretations are fine, different opinions are fine, but you can't just make up stuff. And you certainly cannot make up stuff in a capacity to make critical decisions, or it's just outrageous that in this time and day there's individuals who think they can just make up things, and that we're not sophisticated enough to know that that's false. that we don't have the resources or the data to pull it up to counter that decision. And it's also interesting how I don't know, is that normalized? I am still trying to process what I heard. And if that's, I know it's not normal. So how that could be normal to anyone else or the moderators is beyond me. But we'll just learn from this lesson and move on. And it's always good to know where you stand and where others stand, because then you can make your best decision. So I'm rambling now, but have a good evening, and hopefully next time, or maybe I'll shorten this video or try again. Okay, we'll see you, relatives. Go ahead and send me a message if you want to have additional information, or if you have any ideas how we can crowdsource some information and documents so they won't get corrupted or erased, and we could just continue to provide. We'll focus on the budget, and we'll focus on how programs are pulling that together. And I think a critical question for me is how much of that funding goes to direct services. And because as we move forward and say, well, the Navajo Nation has a revenue decline, see, that's not really a revenue decline and how that impacts the people. Because if we have a low percentage of direct services, it's gonna be the fluff, some of the padding of the budgets that are gonna be impacted. And so we'll go through that, and it may be as exciting as watching paint dry on a wall, or for some of my policy wonks out there, it might be interesting to understand how our budgets come together, where our revenue really comes from, and how collectively we use that funding. And maybe it's time for complete transparency. I like that one of the candidates had posted about sunshine laws, so you have complete transparency of all of the transactions, and at your convenience you can look through on what funding's being spent, what contracts are being issued, and all about that accountability. Because I also think it goes into then what is that, at the end, what's the end result, and how do we manage that? Okay, so let's have that conversation. I think I'm enjoying this like light, very cool breeze. The clouds have kind of cleared, and so to be able to see the stars, I'm just kind of enjoying my body, just enjoying this cool weather, because it's been very hot, and I hope you're taking care of yourself. So we'll talk soon. And we missed some of my faves. I didn't see them at tonight's forum, but I know gas is expensive. We all gotta work. We all have that hustle. But I hope you watch it and do some commentary. I really enjoy hearing others' feedback, especially when you're not like in the midst of things, because then it's like a great different perspective. And it's wonderful that more and more of our people are listening and tuning in and having their opinions on the matter. But again, we cannot dispute the facts, the black and white, the paper, the data, primary source. Okay, we'll see you. I'm going now.